we already have stuff here. So this is pretty crazy. So we already have 5 hazards here. And remember, just now, it took us like 5 or a couple of minutes just to create like 1 hazard. And now it took us a couple seconds to have 5 hazards. And check this out. The false negative and false positive, it even had the same idea like like what we created earlier. And I think this is pretty insane. What we're going to look at is pretty crazy because that enables you to speed up your medical device risk management by a factor of 1,000. And that's not even an exaggeration, because usually medical device risk management might take you, well, a couple of weeks at least, or usually a couple of months. And here today with AI, we're going to do it in a few seconds. So if you haven't been doing your risk management so far with AI, this is definitely for you. So you can see actually what sort of crazy productivity gains you can get out of our eQMS software. So talking about eQMS software, we are called Open Regulatory, and we offer something called eQMS software, which is essentially documentation software for medical device compliance. And in contrast to our competitors, our pricing is not borderline insane, and that's why we are super popular among startups. You can get our software already for free, 99 euros per month or 499 euros per month. And those are flat prices, so you have no hidden costs. And in the 499 tier, you even have unlimited user seats. So that's pretty insane, but that's also pretty boring. So let's talk about AI and risk management instead. Before I get into that, let's actually look at how risk management generally works. And this won't be too boring, as I'll walk through it pretty quickly, but we still need to cover some basics. So let me show you how it looks in our software. So we create something called like a product in Formwork. So let's call it like test product the old school way. So we're not going to use AI for that. So I just want to show you how clunky and how difficult the risk management process usually is for medical device compliance. And let's skip the description for now. We actually don't need it. We say software, it's class B. I'll just skip all of that. And in this case, we won't start with AI-generated content because I want to show you how risk management actually is done the old school way. Okay, our new product has been created and things are looking pretty empty. And that is expected because we actually haven't been using AI features for this first example yet. Let's just take a quick look at how we do risk analysis, in this case, starting from scratch. So you have something in Formwork called the risk matrix, and this is scaffolded out with some sensible defaults and no AI involved. This is already very helpful. So you kind of like get these things we call probability categories and severity categories. Essentially, severity categories are kind of like the categories of things which can go wrong, up to death, for example. And probability categories are kind of like always these groups of probabilities where you like group multiple probabilities together based on like intervals of 10 to the power of 2. And then you kind of like just group all of this together here in a matrix, and you deem certain things acceptable and some are not acceptable. For example, in this case, it's never acceptable to cause death, but it might be always acceptable to cause minor reversible damage. So this is kind of like something you as a company have to decide based on your device. So I won't go into too much detail here. Let's just assume our device is doing some sort of AI-assisted radiology diagnosis of broken bones, of leg fractures. Okay, so in that case, we have in the risk analysis we have 3 things. We have hazards, hazardous situations, and harms. And hazard is the thing which kind of like goes wrong as the first thing in like a chain. Okay, so if we look into hazards, so now we have to create a hazard. So let's actually create this hazard, and that's typically something like, okay, a fracture is diagnosed by the software, but no fracture exists. So this is a false positive. Right. Okay, and then theoretically you need to link this to user needs, preliminary hazards, and failure modes, but we'll skip that. Okay, and then the next step now would be to define a hazardous situation. So this is kind of like the next step in the chain of risk events, if you want. So this is the first thing which happens. So fracture, but we have a fracture, but it's a false positive fracture diagnosis. Now we do the next step, hazardous situation, and that might be the physician believes a wrong diagnosis. Because like if the software just displays it, no harm is done yet. But now the physician looks at the software and is like, oh, right, I think there is a fracture here because the software told me so, but there isn't. So you save that. And finally, you have the harm. And the harm That's kind of like a good question here, right? So the physician believes it, but there's actually no fracture there. So I would say you have an unnecessary medical intervention. Unnecessary medical intervention. Let's say, like, for example, operation, even though patient was healthy in this case, no fracture. Okay, so, we have to select the severity category. That's probably, it's not really irreversible damage because they'll open the person up and close them again in this constructed scenario. So let's call it minor damage. Okay, but we're still not done yet. Now in the risk table, we have to tie everything together, and this is kind of like, well, you can kind of like see this is getting a bit painful, right? Because we just are doing like one entry in the risk table right now, and we already kind of like, and we are already like super fast here, right? We're doing this in a couple of minutes. Usually other companies, they take like weeks for this already, and this is because our software is pretty good at this, pretty good at kind of like assisting you with these forms. But yeah, it's already a painful process. Okay, so we create this risk table entry, and we have to essentially just link all of these things together, because right now the software doesn't know those things are actually part of like the same risk. So you have like the hazardous situation, and finally you have the harm. So we have linked them here. But now you also have to select probabilities of one thing leading to the other. So you have like probability of the hazardous situation leading to the harm. Let's just say not every time the physician believes the wrong diagnosis, they actually operate, because maybe another physician will like catch this. So let's do like 10 to the power of -2. And then hazardous situation leading to harm. Well, I mean, to be fair, everyone who gets the unnecessary medical intervention, they get harmed. So it's like 100% here. Okay, so let's skip this, skip the description, I think, and we are done. Yeah, so this is one entry in our risk table, and this took us like 5 minutes, but I mean, okay, we were also super fast here for this video. Okay. But yeah, you can kind of like see that this is a cumbersome process. So now I would have to like go ahead and create even more hazards, even more hazardous situations, even more harms. And I've been doing things fairly quickly here. If you would do it like really like a bit better than I've been doing things, you would, for example, have to go back in here and actually write like a more elaborate description than what I wrote here. So this is kind of like a very difficult process. And then for some devices, and if you're new to this, you might also not really know where to start, because risk management is it can be very complicated. And you kind of like might think like, hey, do I have to like create like 100 risks and that means I'll never be done? Or do I create 10? Or how does it look like? So it is like a very clunky process. And now the crazy thing is, what we're going to do next is like, we're going to do it with AI in a few seconds. So we just like assume, okay, this would have taken us, I mean, in the context of a company, of a big team, it would probably take us like a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And now we're going to do the same thing with AI in a few seconds. So check this out. We go back and create a new product. Let's call it test product with AI. This time we actually need to add a description, because the AI needs like a description to work with something. It can't read our mind yet. So let's use the same device. So radiology AI software, which looks at X-ray images to detect leg fractures and detects leg fractures. It highlights leg fractures with a colorful overlay. Great. Okay, so your intended use is probably more elaborate than this, but you get the idea. Okay, software class B. And now, yes, we start with AI-generated content. So let's check this out. So we save it, and now we see something crazy, generating risk table. So the big question kind of like is like, what will happen next if we go to the hazards? Like, will we have to start from scratch? Or will the AI already have generated something for us, and how useful will it be? I think that's super exciting. So while this is actually working, I think we can already take a look at whether something has been created here. We already have stuff here, so this is pretty crazy. So we already have 5 hazards here, and remember, just now it took us like a couple of minutes just to create like one hazard, and now it took us a couple seconds to have 5 hazards. And check this out, the false negative and false positive, it even had the same idea like what we created earlier. And I think this is pretty insane, because Not like, I would say this is already better than 50% or maybe even 80% of consultants, because most consultants don't understand software. And most consultants especially don't understand machine learning. So let's look at one of these. Let's look at the false positive one, because that's also the one we added earlier. So, and the cool thing is we even got a description here. So the AI actually was better than what we created. So we can take a look. Okay, false positive fracture detection. The AI software incorrectly identifies a fracture where there is no one in the X-ray image. That's correct. Awesome. So this is pretty cool. How about the hazardous situation? Okay, so we have a few here. So we have a few more here. So let's look at something. Yeah, how about this one? User misinterprets AI output. This is actually, by the way, the same hazardous situation which we added earlier. So the AI also got that, and this is insane. You got 8 hazardous situations, kind of like for free by the AI, and they look pretty useful. How about harms? Yeah, and look at that. You even have harms. So you have delayed fracture healing, increased pain and disability. Probably, yeah, check it out. You even have the unnecessary surgery here. So all of these actually look pretty useful. And it gets even better than that. So now it ties everything together in the risk table. So let's actually look at the risk table and check this out. You have like a complete risk table waiting for you. I think this is simply pretty crazy. So let's actually just look at one of those. How about this one? Okay, false negative fracture detection, and then a certain probability leading to a hazardous situation. Undetected fracture leads to complications. So yeah, we're looking at false negatives in this case. So we don't detect the fracture, and then increased pain and disability. A lot of that makes a lot of sense. And then it even added risk controls, and it even like reduced the risk. So this is just completely insane. And how long did it take us? A few seconds. So that's AI-based risk analysis in Formwork, our eQMS software. And I think it is pretty insane. And I don't know of any other software which currently comes close to this, especially not available for startups. And the crazy news is like Formwork is not very expensive in contrast to the crazy borderline crazy pricing of our competitors. So the community edition is free. Then you have Formwork Starter for 99 euros per month, and you have Formwork eQMS and TechDoc for 499 euros per month. And you already get access to the AI features in both of the paid tiers. So starting already at 99 euros per month. I think that is just pretty insane and pretty good value for money. And you can sign up right now. There's no shady like sales call or demo call you have to schedule. You can just hit this button, register now, and that's it. And that's it. That's all we have for AI-based risk management for today. If you're interested in more content and more videos about how AI can help you in your medical device compliance, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. And otherwise, check out the link in the description so you can register for Formwork and get started yourself.